Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita with Future Pastimes. I'm a designer on Dune-themed games and expansions. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about a power alliance that I call the Sleeper Alliance. And that is one that exists between House Ekaz and the Bene Gesserit. And the Sleeper must awaken. And the reason I call it the Sleeper Alliance is largely because of one factor: how insidiously they can take advantage of the Occupy advantage through the spiritual advisors. And so we're going to take a look at that and why it is so sneaky and powerful enough that the whole alliance is named after this one maneuver that they can do. Now, we're going to start off by just kind of recapping a couple of things that Ekaz and the Bene Gesserit bring to any alliance. First of all, it cannot be denied that voice is one of the most powerful effects in the game. The Bene Gesserit have it as an advantage for any of the battles that they are in, and they can provide that advantage to their ally when their ally is in a battle as well. And so the voice, as you know, you require your opponent to play or not play a class of weapon, projectile, or poison, or specific special weapons like the laser gun or poison blade or artillery strike. But it can also affect things like cheap hero. And it's very effective, very potent. But the other thing that they can do, especially in advance, and that's really what this Power Alliance is, it's about the advanced version of it, is the spiritual advisors. So the Bene Gesserit, when other factions ship to the surface of the planet, they can send along one of their Bene Gesserit forces into that territory, flipped to its advisor side, and that is the side that has the lines through the token. And the advisors, they really don't count as if they are on the board for any other effects, for the most part. There's one notable exception, and it has to do with the Moritani, but we're not talking about them in this one. So they can't collect spice, and they don't get into battles. They're subject to effects like storm and explosions and worms, but they don't have any other agency on the board. The other way that they can have advisors is when they've got their forces, their normal fighting forces in a territory, and somebody enters that territory. They can use their intrusion ability here, where they may flip all of those fighters in that territory to advisors, and so they're avoiding a fight. Now, what's going to happen is, over the course of a game, the Bene Gesserit advisors are going to start showing up in different territories as more players ship into the same stronghold. For example, they can keep sending an advisor along, and they start to stockpile. Now, the Ekaz, they've got two main things that they do in basic. One is their ambassadors, and the ambassador tokens let them trigger a variety of effects. And each of the ambassadors corresponds to a faction in the game other than Moritani. And when a faction that is not matching the one of the advisor ships or moves into that territory, Ekaz has the ability to trigger that effect and gain its bonuses. And when they're in an alliance, they can allow their ally to gain the bonuses of those effects. And an example is the Atreides ambassador lets Ekaz see the hand of the faction that has triggered it. The Chom one lets them discard any of their treachery cards and gain 3 spice for each one. The Fremen one lets them move a group of their forces on the board to any territory, subject to storm and occupancy. So those are very handy, but it's the other Ekaz effect that really is central to the Sleeper Alliance and their strength, getting back to those spiritual advisors. And Occupy works by allowing a faction and their ally to be in the same territory. And if there's a battle, they can decide amongst them, or ultimately Ekaz decides which one of them is fighting the battle. But irrespective of who fights that battle, it's Ekaz's allies' forces that get dialed, and Ekaz's forces are going to count at full strength, half of those forces to the ultimate battle strength. And that Occupy element becomes very powerful. Now, what happens here is we get a situation where Ekaz is in a territory with spiritual advisors that are not really counting anything. And then before the shipping and movement phase, the Bene Gesserit decides to flip all of those advisors to fighters. Or there's a territory where the Bene Gesserit are and the ECAS isn't, and they flip. But then during shipping and movement, ECAS ships down to that territory so that they are both in that territory. And one of the perks of the Occupy advantage here is that if at the end of a game round, ECAS and their ally are both co-occupying 3 strongholds, they win the game. So they don't necessarily need to control 4 strongholds between them if they can get their forces into the same 3 strongholds. So 3 is much easier to capture and defend than 4. You're able to concentrate your forces more. So if the Sleeper Alliance happens a little bit later in the game, you've had a few turns for the Bene Gesserit to build up their spiritual advisors in a few key territories. 2 is really all they really need to do, but they can sometimes, they're sometimes in several. But if they've got some forces in the Polar Sink as well, because that's their alternative destination, when other factions ship, they can just put those forces into Polar Sink. And when they have flipped to fighters, even if they have the ECAS faction in that territory with them in Carthag or Arakeen, they've got ornithopters, which lets them move those forces into Polar Sink into either of those cities, or into Siege Tabor, or into Tuik Siege. So it gives them a lot of flexibility to bring possibly a very large stack of forces. And that's not even with shipping. So you could have a situation where they have flipped from advisors to fighters in Carthag and Arakeen. They ship some forces into Tuix or into Habanya, and then they move a stack of their forces from the Polar Sink to Siege Tabor, or to bolster their forces in one of those other strongholds. And then if you've got ECAS, likewise, in 3 or more of those territories, they're much more likely to win the game, especially armed with the Voice. Now, neither of these factions is an economic faction, so that is their one drawback, is they don't really have a good source of income. Now, in Advanced of Bene Gesserit, they're picking up 2 spice in Chom Charity, whether they need it or not, and they'll always kind of need it. And there's a couple of ambassadors that can provide some income for ECAS. The Emperor token is going to give them 5 spice from the Spice Bank. As I mentioned, the Chom one will let them sell some cards that they maybe either don't want or don't need, and get some spice that way. But otherwise, they don't really have much of an income, although they do have the collection ability in Advanced. And that means that if they and the Bene Gesserit have forces, not advisors, but forces, fighters, in Carthag, Arakeen, Tuix, when it comes to spice collection and you're collecting spice for occupying those strongholds, both factions will collect. So if they're both in Arakeen, they will each get 2 spice. But again, it's not really much of an income, so it's a little bit. So they need to be frugal, they need to be smart. If they are looking to go for the win in 3 co-occupied strongholds, that means that either one of them can fight each of those battles. Now, the Bene Gesserit, all their leaders are strength 5, which is pretty good. ECAS, they don't have a lot of very strong leaders. They're all kind of mid, but they can potentially get a hold of Duke Vidal. And if necessary, they can give Duke Vidal to the Bene Gesserit when it's triggered, so that if they want the Bene Gesserit to do all the fighting, they've got now a 6 strength leader that cannot be tradered or faced answered as a verb, and so that might be just what they need, combined with the Voice. But like I said, if you know that either one of you can fight those, you can concentrate on getting treachery cards into only one player's hand. So normally, what happens when you're in an alliance, you know that when it's going to be battle time, one of you is probably having to fend off other factions in 1 or 2 strongholds, while the other one is fending off factions in the other strongholds in your 4 stronghold alliance. And so you both need to have cards in order to to do that. But the advantage here is that only one of you really needs to have a good hand of treachery cards. And it may only be a matter of we've got a good weapon or a good defense, and we're using the voice to counter the other side of the equation. And then it's going to be mostly down to the strength of the leaders, where the Bene Gesserit have a pretty good advantage over most other factions on average. And then the forces, where you're getting that nice boost from the ECAS forces, counting at full strength for half of them. So if you've got 4, that's a +2. If you've got 6 of them in there, that's a +3. And then you just need to not full dial for the Bene Gesserit. If you leave one Bene Gesserit behind with the at least one ECAS force in there, that's enough to co-occupy in that stronghold. 3 of those gets you the win. So it can be very formidable. Any faction that is allied with the Bene Gesserit, you know that you're in pretty good hands because the voice is so strong. And really, any faction that's allied with ECAS can take advantage of that occupy advantage, which can be very potent. Like I said, you got only one faction needs to have a good hand of treachery cards to win those battles. And you can collude to figure out who should get it, who has the best opportunity to win. Try to take advantage of the ambassadors to position yourself or prepare yourself for victory. That's going to be a little bit of a dice roll there, because you're getting a random mix of ambassadors, and once they're all 5 of the non-ECAS ambassadors have been triggered, you're getting 5 more at random. So it's going to be really a mystery about which ones you'll get. But once you have those, then you can start to form a good strategy for where to deploy them, which ones to deploy, and when, to improve your chances of going for the win when it comes time to do that. And that's when you want the flip from advisors to fighters, so that you can maximize their effectiveness. And it lets you bide your time until you are ready. So that turn where you've got the good treachery cards, you've got enough spice for you both to ship down and then win those battles. So there you have it, the Sleeper faction, Sleeper Alliance, and how they work. Let me know in the comments what you think of this alliance. If you've seen it in action, let me know how they did. Were you in the alliance? How did you fare if you were against it? How smart were they in employing their sleeper ability, as it were, to try to win the game? That's it for this one, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.